Here's what a lot of real estate agents tell me. They tell me, my market, Brandon, you don't understand. It's ultra, ultra competitive. Brandon, you don't understand. I don't have any for sale by owners or expireds. How in the world am I going to go out there and actually get listings? Well, in this video, I'm going to share a conversation that I had with an agent who I'm coaching, who A, is in one of the most competitive markets in the country. B, he's in a market where there are no for sale by owners, there are no expired listings. And C, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is not only is he in a market that's very tough, not only is he in a market where for sale by owners and expired listing and low-hanging fruit doesn't exist, he's in a market where he's brand new, meaning he just moved there. He doesn't know anybody. He has no sphere of influence. And so I only say that to help break through any limiting beliefs that you may have when it comes to growing your real estate sales business. And in this video, we're going to break down his entire strategy. That's different than a lot of the other agents that I have on the channel. We're going to break down all of his systems. We're going to break down his mindset, his skill set, what happens when he gets a new seller. We're going to break all of that down. And before we begin, if you're sitting there watching this video, saying to yourself, okay, this guy is earning $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and I'm not there yet, but you're actually committed to making that happen, perhaps it's time for us to have a conversation about a coaching relationship. And so I'm going to put a link in the description right underneath this video. You can schedule a day and time for us to have a conversation. We can ask each other some questions and then determine if you're ready to have that type of accountability in your business, if you're ready to learn the skills to go out there and generate a multiple six-figure listing agent business, then feel free to schedule a call. And listen, if that's not for you yet, all good. In this video, you're going to get almost an hour's worth of real, practical, tactical things that you can implement in your business right away. Enjoy. You did what you've done in the last 2 years in a brand new market. So it's one thing for an agent in their first year or two to come out of the gate and have a bunch of success when they're selling real estate in a market where they grew up, where they knew everybody. That was not the case for you. So you moved from Denver to essentially just south of San Diego. Is that right?
South Orange County, so north of San Diego. I'm in San Clemente, so it's right on the border of Orange County and San Diego County. It's the southernmost city in Orange County.
And how many people did you know when you moved there? Like, did you have this huge sphere of influence? So like you moved there and you had all this business waiting for you?
I wish I did, but I didn't. I knew one person, and funny enough, he's actually on the call. So that's a story for another time.
So not only did you start as a brand new real estate agent, you started in a brand new market. You didn't even know anybody. And so share with people how you did your very first year in total gross commission earned, and then where you're at this year.
Yeah. So I took the test in August of 22. I started actually like working probably like October 1st of 2022. Didn't close my first transaction until January of 23. So that was really kind of my first full year was, January to December of 2023. So that first year I finished the year just under 200,000 in GCI. I was at like 198 and some change. And then this year closed and pending. So as of today, I'm at $391,251 closed and pending year to date.
It's incredible. So you're going to do just about $400,000 in income in your second year in business. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And it's crazy to say that because, it doesn't feel that way, right? I'm sure you know that. Like it just, you don't really realize it until you put it down on paper. And in fact, I didn't even know that was the number until I wrote it out this morning. So it's kind of crazy.
It is crazy because what were you doing before you got into real estate?
So when I first got out here, I was a bartender actually. And I did that for a couple years, managed restaurants, bartended.
Were you making $400,000 a year?
No. I think the most I ever made in a year was like 60 grand or something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the people here want to know how you did it. Okay, so let's do this. We're gonna kind of we're gonna break down kind of what your business looks like, what the numbers look like, and so in speaking around 2024 numbers, how many listings have you taken so far this year?
Um, let's see. I pulled a total transactions amount. So total transactions amount was 16 transactions.
Yep.
I would say probably around 11 of those were listings, just going off the top of my head.
Perfect. Okay, so 16 closed transactions, and as we kind of break down your conversion funnel, if you will,
Mhm.
what is your listing met to listing taken ratio? In other words, Brandon, how are you closing these days? When you go on 10 listing appointments, how many will you typically get?
Yeah, so I got all the numbers right here. So met to taken right now, I'm at 55%. And I'm counting. So a lot of my business, just kind of due to the nature of what I'm prospecting, a lot of circle prospecting, a lot of them are kind of like hybrid preview appointments almost, I guess you could say. So in that number, I'm counting a couple of preview appointments that I went on where somebody ended up listing maybe with another agent down the line. So right at 55%.
Yeah, and we're going to break all that down here in just a minute. So met to taken's 55%. We'll talk about how you got to that number. And then your listing appointment set to met ratio, what does that look like?
65%.
65%. We'll talk about that ratio. Your leads. So how many leads have you actually generated this year? And what is your lead to appointment set ratio?
So since I've been tracking, which, in the beginning, I'll be honest, I wasn't super consistent with my tracking. I've generated 75 leads, and lead to appointment set is right at 23%.
I love it. It's amazing. And then conversation to lead. So this is the big one that everybody likes to, we're going to talk a lot about this today. So we'll talk about how you're getting into these conversations in a second. But out of 10 conversations, let's just say, how many of those typically turn into a lead in your world? What's the percentage?
So I'm at 5.7 contact to lead.
5.7 contacts per lead.
Yeah, 5.7% contact to lead.
Oh, 5.7%. Yeah, got it. Beautiful.
Yeah, yep.
Love it. And then contacts per hour.
Contacts per hour is right around 8 contacts per hour.
Perfect. Okay. So now that we've got the numbers, we're going to kind of drill into each one of those because this is where all the nuts and bolts come from. So people, hopefully you got something to write with. I'm going to take notes myself. I got a front row seat to this thing. So Brandon, let's get into it. What are your lead sources? First off, what are the lead sources that you're working right now?
Yeah, so I would say 95% of what I'm working right now is like demographic circle prospecting. So it's downsizers likely to sell, absentee owners. I'll call expireds and canceleds here and there if I see something that I like within, a geographical area that I want to work. But it's really just those demographic circle and expireds and canceleds.
All right. Now, this is what's so interesting to me because most people are talking about for sale by owners and expireds. And for years and years and years, I'm trying to get people to expand their approach when it comes to client acquisition to focus more on demographic prospecting. Because with your business model, the complaint is, well, all that business takes so long to convert. I need business now. I need business now. But somehow you're able to make this happen because with expireds and for sale by owners, the competition is so high. So we got plenty of time. Help the people understand when you say demographic prospecting, you talked about downsizers. You talked about some of these different demographics. First off, how are you getting the data? And then what is your contact approach? Are you putting like a bat signal in the air and they call you? Or how is it that you actually get into these conversations?
Yeah. So as far as where I'm getting the data from, so for like likely to sell lists and downsizers, I'm getting those lists from the share group, which it's, they're awesome. It's really easy to just go there and buy the data. It's already filtered for you and it's pretty accurate for the most part. And then as far as how I'm getting in touch with them, I wish that they were calling me, but no, it's an outbound approach, which is no surprise here. So plugging them into the triple line dialer and just, getting after it.
Well, wait, you call them?
Believe it or not, yeah, I do.
You're crazy. You're one of the crazy people that call people. Insane. Okay. So you
Yeah,
call people and you're telling me they answer the phone in 2024.
they do. They do answer the phone. You don't always know what you're going to get on the other line, but they do answer the phone.
Insane. So joking aside, so you take an outbound lead generation approach. You're being proactive. You're focused on this area of business where competition is very low, right? You are in probably one of the most competitive areas when it comes to real estate sales in the country. Probably where you're at, and then like South Florida are probably two of the most competitive places. And so you made a business decision to say, well, I'm going to go after the business that I want, the business that I know I can sell, the product line that I know I can sell, and the clientele that I want to serve, where it's more of a blue ocean. You don't have to worry about all the competition. So how would you answer the question from agents to say, dude, how are you doing all this business and you're going after these lead sources which historically take 6-12 months to convert? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so it does take time, right? Now, if you make thousands and thousands of calls, you're going to get lucky every once in a while and find that seller that's ready to go within 2 weeks, a month. But a really good example is I just put one under contract today. A circle prospect from 6 months ago, downsizers, so they're selling their property for $1 million, and they're going to buy a single story down the street. So contacted them, met with them, built a relationship over the past 6 months. There was no interview process because I was just there for the last 6 months, right? I was consistent with my follow up. I showed them properties. We met several times. And finally, they called me and said, hey, it's no longer an option for us to stay here. We got to get the home sold. And, from contact to open contract, it was literally 6 months. So, to answer your question, it does take time. But if you do it consistently and you're consistently hitting those numbers and you're building a pipeline, it kind of starts to it's a snowball effect almost. And then all of a sudden you're taking listings that you talked to 6 months ago, which
That's
is
right.
great.
It's the first 6 months. It's the pipeline maturity that you're talking about. The first 6 months, it might be like, dude, man, I don't know if this is working or not. And then boom, you get one. You get a listing from someone you talked to 4.5, 5 months ago, and now you're in momentum. And as you guys have questions, you guys can throw that in the Q&A function. So for those of you that are part of the inner circle and you're watching this live and you want to ask Brandon a question at the end, throw that in the Q&A and I'll go back and answer those questions. Okay. So we'll do like we always do every week. We'll do 15 minutes of Q&A. So you can throw that right in the Q&A tab. All right. So let me just clarify that. So if you sold 16 properties and the vast majority coming through this methodology of lead generation, how many of those were from people that you spoke to this year versus the people that you spoke to last year that just converted this year? I want to give people an understanding of this pipeline maturity thing, Brandon, because until you've experienced it, people can intellectually understand it, but they don't understand emotionally how it feels. So I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head or if you could give us your best guess, but how much of your business that you've actually got paid on in 2024 came from the work you did in 2024 versus the work you did in 2023?
So I think it's kind of a skewed number. I think going forward, like if you ask me this question next year, I think it'll be more. I think this year I would say between 30 to 50% probably. I actually looked at my sources from where some of my business came from this year, and I actually did do a lot of referral and past client SOI business this year, which is kind of funny because I'm not from here, but it's past clients that are
Right.
buying multiple properties that over the past 2 years I've done a lot of transactions with. So, yeah, I would say probably this year between 30 to 50%.
That's great. And that just keeps building and building. That's how your business continues to scale. That's how you went from your first year making 200 to your second year, you made 400. Like that jump is huge. Why? Because you have a pipeline. Okay. Now, when you're talking about prospecting, you're calling these people. How much time are you spending making those outbound calls typically on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I would say probably up until recently, it's been about 2 hours a day. It needs to be more. So going forward, my goal is going to be 30 contacts a day, regardless of how long that takes me. When I do hit 30 consistently, it usually takes me somewhere between 3 to 4 hours.
Got it. Okay. So 2 hours right now gets you what? Right around 20 contacts, something like that?
Yeah, 20 to 25.
Yeah. And one of the numbers that you mentioned already is that so contact, just for the audience, you're talking about talking to somebody, a Bob Jones, you call Bob Jones, you get Bob Jones on the phone and you talk to Bob Jones. And regardless of the outcome, that's a contact. What you said earlier is 5% of the time, 5% of the time, you're having a conversation with one of these people, it actually turns into a lead. Can you define for us what you mean by lead? What does the lead mean in your business?
Yeah, so obviously, you teach us the criteria for what a lead is. I think the biggest thing for me when I'm talking to these people on the phone is I've been guilty of lead stuffing in the past, and I think that some of the leads I've generated this year, even since the early days of being in the program, I would say there's probably definitely some hopium built into that lead pool there. But for me, it's just identifying, is there motivation, right? Is there pain? Do they have problems with where they're living now? Like, are they, if it's a downsizer, right? Are the stairs too much for them? Is it too big, right? Do they need to get closer to family? So there has to be some sort of driving force. It can't just be, I would sell if I get this crazy price, because I think everybody would do that. So, that's been my biggest thing, is just drilling down what an actual lead looks like. So motivation, ability, right? Obviously, depending on what they tell me, I'll ask them, if you did get an offer in the next 30 days, 1 month, 2 months, is that something you could actually do? Or, do you have to wait until next school year? So just seeing, do they have the ability to actually move? Reason, again, why are you moving, right? And then timeline. So kind of just hitting on the DART framework. And then also, with a lot of my contacts, being that it's circle prospecting, I'm asking them if I can stay in touch. So I'm asking, would you hate me if I stayed in touch? Would, if I sent you my resume, would you throw it in the trash? Like, I'm just trying to slowly nurture these people over time. That way, when they are ready to transact, there's not much of an interview. It's just like, hey, come over, I'm ready to sell. So those are kind of the biggest things I'm looking for. I don't focus too much on whether or not they have an agent. It kind of just depends on how the initial conversation goes. If they lead me to believe that they do, then I'll ask them something along the lines of, how committed they are to working to that agent, even if I could provide them some sort of value, if that makes sense.
Totally. I'm the same way, right? I mean, through that conversation, it naturally comes out. If we're talking about, hey, when the day comes and you're actually making a move, that's going to come out if they've already got somebody they're going to work with. And so what we're talking about, for clarity, is that every about 20 of those conversations, you're actually generating a lead. And here's the thing. Most agents won't do the work. They won't do the 20 conversations to get the one lead. They'd rather just pay a company to get the lead. You're able to generate it through your skill set. And that's why we love this business model so much. It's because, and I would make the argument that the leads these agents want to buy, Brandon, are nowhere close to the quality that you're able to generate, because you've had a personalized voice-to-voice conversation with them yourself. And so it's amazing that if you just are willing to put in the work, the leads are plentiful. Would you agree with that?
100%. It's funny you say that, because my previous brokerage, I came from somewhere where there were a ton of lead opportunities. So I got to see every single lead you can imagine: Zillow buyer leads, Zillow seller leads, home light leads. And these people, like, when you call them, I mean, it's terrible. Like, I think it's harder than like just a random cold call, right?
Exactly.
Because they want nothing to do with you, right? Half the time they're not serious. So, and granted, I wasn't paying for it. So, it wasn't like I was paying for it and I was wasting money on it. They were being provided to us, which was great. But 100%, just being able to have that natural conversation with somebody, and again, see if it's a relationship that it even makes sense to nurture or not. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Where you always say it, right? Red gumball, blue gumball. Like, you're looking for that one or two people that it makes sense to have a conversation with at another point down the road. And I think one of my biggest issues early on was I just tried to make everybody a lead, right? I was like, oh, like, you don't want to sell? Well, are you selling in 10 years? Cool. If you are, then I'm going to put you in my database, right? So it's just having that abundant mindset of like, who do I actually want to continue to spend time on? Versus, hey, if you're never going to do business with me, that's totally fine. Like, I'm just going to delete you out of my database and never have to worry about you ever again.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll talk about follow up in just a minute. Can you walk us through maybe some of the sales skills that you've learned that you use on the phone to handle these conversations, right? So you don't have to go through the whole script, but like, what is your approach with the conversation, and maybe what's one or two skills that you really utilize a lot when you're talking with these people over the phone?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've like when I look back to, not to get like too nitty gritty and detailed with like all the different types of language, but when I look back at, because I was cold calling before I got into your program, I just didn't know what I was doing, right? I was telling everybody I had a buyer. I was saying I have a buyer, right? And that never worked. But I think when I look at the difference, it's just being like forthcoming about why you're actually calling, getting permission to have the conversation. So the pattern interrupt has been huge. Again, you're opening up the conversation. And from there, with with the people that I'm calling, I'm going for disqualification right away. I'm asking something along the lines of, Brandon, that home over there off 123 Main Street. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I kind of get the feeling that you're going to tell me there's no way in hell you're ever selling that property, regardless of what the market's doing. Is that right? And I just kind of see what they say. And if they push back against me at all, I know that there's at least something there for me to dig deeper into, right? Whereas if they agree with me and they're like, yeah, you're gonna have to take me out of here in a casket, which I hear like 95% of the time,
That's right.
then it's like, what's the point? Like, cool, okay, have a great day, appreciate it, goodbye.
That's it. So what you've learned, like this is what I've been talking about a lot lately, which is when we talk about disqualification, it's a term that is a little bit vague. And so the process of disqualification is understanding first that while prospecting, there are way more reasons as to why that person is not going to do business with you than there are reasons that they will. And so what you're doing is, because you've done this now for a while, right? You've learned that, dude, if I go into this call and I ask them, hey, are you interested in selling your house? It's a bad question, right? You're just setting yourself up to get a bunch of reflex counterfeit no's. So what you're doing is you're going after genuine no's. And you're doing that by actually getting in front of any objection you could ever get. You're the one actually bringing up the objection first and seeing if the prospect will agree with you. Is that right?
100%. And that one thing, like something that always like resonated with me, like you teach us so much stuff that sometimes it can be very hard to retain it all, but I try and find like little key things that you say, or that not just you, but anybody in the program says, that I remember. And one that really stuck with me was the phrase pulling the pin. Like, just pull the pin on whatever the objection is, or whatever you want them to fight against, and see what they do with it. So like for me, I'm constantly always looking for any ways that I can pull the pin. I mean, I'll even tell people, if they do show me that they're interested, or if I get some sort of insight that they might be interested in selling down the road, I'll even say something along the lines of, Brandon, can I be honest with you for a second? I kind of get the feeling you're going to tell me that even if you do sell this property next March, you probably already have an agent that you're going to do business with. Am I right? And I just see what they say, because I'm not going to ask them, do you have an agent that you're going to work with? It's so easy to just say yes to that question. Like, yes, get off the phone, goodbye.
So smart.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, any chance I can get to use that language, I'm using it.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. And for people that don't understand how to yet use that type of technique, it takes a little while to get used to, because it takes a while for you to really grasp what it is that we're doing, And so, because that didn't come naturally for you at first, right? When I started to teach you this, you were probably like, what are we doing here? Did you have one of those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I won't say I was skeptical, just because I'm the type of person where if I'm going to do something, like I already know on the forefront, I'm just going to like go all in on it. Right. So I was never skeptical, but it was just like, kind of had that, like specifically the pattern interrupt. I remember thinking to myself, like, does this actually, like, what, like it just didn't make sense to me at first. I was just like, this doesn't seem right. But then you start to do it and you realize, like, wow, okay, this is so much more powerful than I realized.
Yeah, it's so advanced that the first time you hear it, you're like, there's no way it could work. Like there's this huge moment of like, it's kind of like, you know, you're really challenging your own worldview on on language, because what we teach is so different that the language and how it comes out is all designed to speak to someone's like limbic system. And so we don't speak like that. Normally, we don't speak that way. And so when you hear it for the first time, it kind of takes you back a second. So anyway, I'm always curious to see what techniques that you're finding that are working the best. Now, your business model especially is built primarily on lead follow-up, right? I mean, it's probably extremely rare, if ever, that you're getting listing appointments on the very first call. Would that be fair?
Yeah. In fact, I'm looking at where my businesses came from this year, and I've signed 2 expireds. That's it. Like 2 expireds out of all the calls I made. Like it's not super prevalent for me. To your point, majority of my business has came from, whether it was somebody that walked into an open house at a listing of mine last year. Like I have one that's, going to close in 2 weeks. My 3rd highest sale ever that came into my open house and another listing I had in the neighborhood. And, I built a relationship with them over the course of, they walked into my open house last September, right? So it's taken over a year for that to convert. So yeah, a lot of it's just built on follow up. And I've, to counter that, I've seen myself lose so many listings because of not following up enough. Like Brandon, if I told you how much GCI I've left on the table these past 2 years off of just shitty follow up or not staying in touch with people, it's absolutely insane. So follow up is like 100% where it's at, especially with this type of business model.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about it. Like, what are you doing? How do you approach lead follow up? What are your systems? Like, how you generate a lead? Kind of walk us through what happens.
Yeah. So I want to preface this by saying it's still very much a work in progress. I still need a lot of work with my follow-up, but I am aware of it and I'm consciously trying to get better at it. So, I generate a lead and I kind of just follow what you've taught us, right? So I'll add them to my database. I'll send them a handwritten card and a scratch off ticket. Depending on how the conversation goes, I might mention something about the conversation, or I'll just send something generic like, hey, great chatting with you about 123 Main Street. I hope I'm lucky enough to earn your business in the future. From there, depending on if it's a, hot, warm lead or a nurture, which most of mine are nurtures, I'll add them to Mailbox Power. So I am using Mailbox Power. I just, copied all the templates that you provided to us, right? Obviously branded it with my information. On top of that, I'm sending usually like a weekly newsletter. Just high level overview of the market. And, if I just listed something, I'll send that out, or if it's just sold. I leverage my team stuff as well. Right. So, and then outside of that, like, I guess for more personal touches, you can say, I used to have a hard time with calling people, like if nothing happened, because it was just like, hey, I want to check in. Right.
Sure.
And nobody wants to be that guy. So I've tried to not limit my follow-up, but I try and be very intentional, right? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, Brandon, 123 Main Street just got listed down the street. That's super high price. What do you think about that? Right. So it's just more about staying top of mind, right? Because these people, whether it's a circle prospect or not, like there's always somebody else. There's always somebody else calling them, reaching out to them. I'm sure they know 5 agents. So it's like you just got to be the last man standing in the sense of you've stayed in touch with them for the longest.
That's it. So let me just clarify a couple things. So what you just said, I want to help everybody. Everybody struggles with the follow-up call until they do what you just said. So number one, you've got them set up on Mailbox Power. And are you sending them the monthly seller nurture mailer?
Yep. Just there's like 12 different templates and one a month.
One a month. Okay. And then you're sending them an email, weekly newsletter, recapping the market. That's easy, right? You put it together, boom, goes out to everybody. Super scalable, right? Easy to deliver. Both of those are fully leveraged, right? They don't take any of your time to do. And then the calling, if you build the call around setting yourself up with an actual MLS active pending sold search, It's if you're going to do with nurtures, and to your point earlier, everybody always wants to argue that when I ask them to call a nurture monthly, well, Brandon, they're a year out. They never not get the business because they follow up too much, but they always not get the business because they don't follow up enough. And so instead of trying to say to yourself, okay, isn't that a little bit too much? Well, if you actually call with a purpose, to your point, which is all you have to do to simplify the whole thing is if you set yourself up on a search, you look at the search, okay, there's Bob Jones. I owe him a phone call. He's on my monthly nurture list. And just pull up your MLS. Look at the last one it sent you, right? You just look at one, what went active, what went pending. It's not hard. And all you do is reference one of the things on there. Hey, listen, I had you on my mind. It looks like Brandon, a property had just sold. I didn't know if you knew that. And I just tell them what happened. It was listed for X amount of price for X amount of days, and they got this for it. Did you know that? And then it puts me right back in the conversation. I know the last time we spoke, you guys, I know you're not doing anything until next spring, but like I told you, I'm going to make sure that between now and then that you know exactly what's going on so that when the day comes, you know how to navigate this real estate market. Cool. And then to your point, that's when the business is won. Because you do just those three things, right? Generate leads, send out a handwritten card, send them up on Mailbox Power, set them up on the weekly newsletter, and then call them monthly. From that moment to the day they're ready to go, tell us about what you have to do with the presentation to win the business or the lack of. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, there is no presentation. Like, it's funny. I have one specific example that I can think of. When I got, so like early last year, the broker that I was with, he took a listing that was like way out of area that he wanted nothing to do with. So he literally was like, "Hey, I'll pay you $5,000 to go like do the open house and basically like manage the listing." Like, you know what I mean? Like basically, yeah, like it wasn't my listing, but I was like, sure. I didn't have anything else going on at the time. And, manage the listing start to finish. And then after it sold, what I did was I had my title guy provide me a list of, like next sellers, right? Like AI generated next sellers or whatever, people with high equity.
Yeah.
I called around the sale and just said, "Hey, we just sold 123 Main Street, blah, blah, blah. We had this amount of offers. We sold it for this much over the ask price. I was just curious if you guys have had any thoughts of making a move." Brandon, this is back when I had no skills, right? So whatever I said was probably a lot worse than that. I had a lady that gave me, a yes, right? We're thinking about doing something, but we need to do X, Y, and Z to the property. Keep in mind, never met this lady. Followed up with her for 9 months consistently. Finally, gave her some advice on, like renovations that they could do to the property to make it sell for top dollar. From start to finish, it was about a 9-month process. She calls me and says, "Hey, we're ready to sell. Why don't you come down?" Drove down, met her husband, and the sister for the first time, right? Went through the contract. Like, there was no presentation. It was just like, "Hey, let's go through the contract. Let's sign it up." I took pictures that day. It was sold a month and a half later, right? So I met these people twice, and, it led to a $20,000 paycheck. So it works. If you do it consistently, and if you're consistent in the follow-up, it works. All the deals that I've lost has not because I've followed up too much. It's because I didn't follow up enough.
That's right. That's exactly right. So what happens when you actually get a listing? Like, do you have a process? Like, how do you communicate with the seller? How do you ensure that your client has a good experience? Could you give us just maybe a 10,000 foot view of like your listing process?
Yeah. So I can tell you that it's, again, a very much a work in progress. I had a conversation with Rob Neely about this. And I was like, dude, we were talking just about, different markets. And he was like, I got 30 listings right now, or whatever crazy amount of listings he had. And I was like, man, I have 5 listings right now and I'm all over the place. Right. And he's like, you need to work on your system. So for me, I'm definitely fine tuning my systems. And right now I don't have a set in stone. Like, I send out client recaps on Mondays. That's what I'm working towards. Probably like a one-time weekly, kind of just like, here's what's going on. Here's activity. Here's how many showings we had. So, I would say in terms of communication, I'm probably a little too free in terms of how available I make myself to my clients. But again, that's a work in progress. But I think, one thing I can say is, I feel very confident that my clients would say that, I am very, honest with them. I'm very transparent with them. I tell them the good and the bad, right? Like I don't sugarcoat things. And I think they appreciate that. So
Great.
from start to finish, I take a listing. My market, you have to, I would say you might need to, like, people expect a lot here in Orange County. I'll put it that way,
Sure.
right? They want you to put a lot into their property, and they like the kind of the flashy stuff. Like,
Sure.
where are you going to market it? Are you going to stage it? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? So, from start to finish, if I take a listing, I'll usually have a stager come through and walk it and just tell me, here's what we could do. She'll give me a budget, and then I'll talk with the client about that and say, hey, here's what it looks like. Here's a couple options of how we can, either cover this together, or here's what it looks like for you to take on that cost, right? From there, we do obviously professional photography, videography, and then from there, I'm big on inviting the neighbors, right? So I'll call around to the neighborhoods, invite everybody to the open house, because you want to create that buzz, right?
That's right.
You want to create the buzz, you want to get people there.
Are you doing, real quick on that? Just I don't want people to miss that. Are you doing an open house that opening weekend for every listing you take?
I try to, yeah. If I have more than one, then sometimes I have to leverage it.
Sure.
But I usually always try and be there for the first one. I'll usually do like a twilight open house with like some wine and cheese and crackers or something like that.
Yep.
That's worked really well for me in the past. In fact, I did that at one of my listings last year. That led to another listing this year because they came to the open house and they were like,
right.
"Oh, we loved what you did there."
That's the whole point. I mean, that's just what we don't have time to get into the whole, like, what do you do when you get a listing? But like, part of that process should be that you're doing some type of what we call, we brand it as the grand opening event, right? And it's just for neighbors. And it's the whole goal is to build relationships with those people that are watching to see how are you handling this house? Because those are all people that are future seller leads, right? So that's great. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. So yep, you do you promote, you prospect around your open house to get people there, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And then throughout the transaction, just I think just one thing that I've realized, like as I've taken more listings, is just being honest with the client, right, about where things stand. I think in the beginning I took some listings that I probably shouldn't have taken because I was too afraid to communicate the truth.
Yeah.
And that's not only up front, right, but that's also throughout the process, right? Like if you take a listing at a price that you think makes sense, and let's just say the market changes and it doesn't make sense at that price anymore. I mean, you need to be able to explain that to the client and provide data to support that, right? Hey, Bob, we've had 2 showings in 3 months. Like we need to do something here. So I think just being honest and upfront with your clients, not only from the jump, but throughout the entire transaction is super important.
No doubt. So that's amazing, right? And I'm curious, if you had an agent right now who was like, Brandon, I heard this whole thing, right? I heard you go for 40 minutes talking about you're calling these people and you're prospecting and you're doing all this, you're cold calling. Dude, there's got to be an easier way. Like, is there anything, Brandon, how would you communicate, or how would you coach that agent who says, dude, there's got to be a better way? Like, can I just post on social media, or can I do something else, like, and just not call? Like, how would you respond to them?
I would say no. I would say the quickest way to get paid in this business is by having multiple conversations a day. Especially if you don't have a network, right? Or if you don't have people that can buy homes, right? I live in Orange County. My average sales price is $1.2 million. I didn't know a single person that can buy a $1.2 million house, right?
That's
the
right.
people that I was working with bartending, or they weren't buying $1.2 million houses, right? So just having conversations, because not only do you talk to more people that way, but it's like Atomic Habits, right? He talks about like the what does he call it? The period of latent potential, right? Where it's kind of like it's an increasing curve, right? Like you're going to talk to a lot of people in the beginning and you're not going to see anything from it. But what you don't see is your skills are getting better over that time. That way, true. Fast forward 6 months later, well, now it doesn't take you 100 conversations to get one person to invite you over. Maybe it only takes 20, right? So
right.
It's not just like the result of what the calls equal. It's it's building those skills over time. So to not get too long winded, I would say like you got to talk to people and you got to talk to a lot of people because you're going to get better doing that, which is only going to serve you down the road when it comes time to actually service those people.
No doubt. I mean, do you believe you could be where you are right now if you took a passive approach to lead generation? And in other words, if you did some type of advertising or marketing thing and you just waited for people to call you, is there any way you could be where you're at in your second year?
No, I would be broke because when I started, Brandon, I quit my bartending job and I basically was about a stone's throw away from being broke to begin with. So if I would have spent that money on leads or anything like that, social media, I mean, I wouldn't have made it. So.
Well, and that's my last question before we open this up for Q&A. You were broke in the beginning, but somehow you made a decision to invest in yourself and get into coaching. Like, how did you get to that point? Like, you just told me, you just spent the last minute telling me, like, you were on your last leg, you were broke, but somehow, some way, you thought to yourself, wow, it might be a good idea for me to invest and get into coaching. How did you come to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an athlete my entire life. I've always had a coach, right? So it's just like you call it the knowledge tax, right? Like, if you want to know, like, sometimes you got to pay to get the information, right? And part of getting better at something is, yes, most of it is implementation, but there is a piece of it that you need the information. And for me, I did not know what to say on the phone. I just didn't know, right? I was calling people saying, "Hey, I have a buyer, blah, blah, blah." It wasn't working. So I was like, I need new information. Okay. And then I can go out and implement it. It's like, you can't show up on day one of football practice or basketball practice, right? Not have the playbook and then go out there and play with the rest of the guys. Like, you got to have the playbook. Yeah. Right. So for me, it was an easy choice. I mean, I've paid thousands of dollars to go to seminars, put it on a credit card when I literally didn't even have the money in my account, because I always just knew that like I would get something from that would 10x it down the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, our relationship hasn't been like that though, right? I mean, it wasn't worth it for you to invest in doing anything with me.
I think I probably paid for like my next 10 years worth of coaching. So
so funny. So let's do some Q&A. All right. So if you're wondering, where's the Q&A section of this video that just kind of cut off? That's for our private coaching clients and for agents that are in our free course, the Listing Agent Blueprint. You can also get access to that course for free. Right now, there's a link in the description. It'll show you exactly how to go out there and build a business like you've just seen, step by step, and you'll be able to participate in these weekly agent workshops.